Good afternoon and welcome to our final construction management webinar of the year. This session is entitled Get Tender Ready, Navigating CAS Compliance and Social Value Shifts in association with Compliance Chain. Our programme today, we're going to explore what construction businesses need to know to strengthen their positioning for upcoming tenders and contracts. The expert panel of major contractors will break down the Common Assessment Standard, outline how compliance expectations are evolving across the sector, and discuss the growing importance of measurable social value in procurement. The panel will also look at Build UK's role in shaping these standards and what it means for suppliers, contractors, and bidders looking to stay competitive. There'll be a Q&A session at the end. Let me introduce our speakers. We'll have Robbie Blackhurst, Director at Compliance Chain, Dan Billinge, Head of Procurement at BAM UK and Ireland, Kevin Horner, Procurement Operations Leader at Laing O'Rourke, and Richard Smith, Supply Chain Manager at Wates Group. I'm Justin Stanton, Editor of Construction Management Digital. I'm your chair. Some housekeeping before we crack on. Please use the Q&A function, not the chat function. Please use the Q&A function to ask questions. Please keep the questions relevant to today's topic. You can ask questions anonymously or as yourself. However, please note that should we run out of time, anonymous questions can't be answered afterwards. The webinar is being recorded and will be available to watch on demand via the original registration page, probably tomorrow morning. There is 1 hour's CPD credit for those who complete this webinar live. CPD certificates will be issued tomorrow morning. You can only qualify for a CPD credit if you are watching via your own registration link. So that's enough of that. Robbie, it's over to you in the studio with the rest of the panelists.
Thanks, Justin, and thanks for joining us today for this conversation around all things Common Assessment Standards, social value, looking backward and looking forward as well. Let's start looking backward. Have you seen procurements change in terms of the complex needs over the years? Kev?
It's definitely around the compliance piece. You know, within the Common Assessment Standard, there's been a real driver for the Building Safety Act compliance, upskilling the supply chain, the ESG and all the carbon targets that get implemented. It's about evidence of those as well. Our clients want to see evidence around that and bring that down to the supply chain as well. So it's upskilling of everyone around this, and it's been not just a solo thing that each of us contractors have got involved with. We've had to collaborate with everyone on this. You know, of all other contractors, we've had to attend certain working groups that Build UK have hosted to get that aligned position. I think that's what we've seen over the last 2 years, and in particular, the last 12 months, a real driver, especially around the BSA compliance.
Yeah, I think the Common Assessment Standard now, clients are more educated. They're asking for Common Assessment Standard, main contractors, but also supply chain. They want to know who is actually building and doing the work for them.
Have you seen that on the public and private sector front? Obviously, there's obviously the PPNs come out around the Common Assessment Standard for public sector. Have we seen the private sector kicking and screaming, or is it predominantly public sector where we see that request?
I think the public sector, obviously, with the PPN being released, has made it sort of a mandate, but we are seeing that as well with the private sector, and where we're not seeing it, we are utilising the responses to CAS in order to demonstrate some of the bespoke questions that generally align to CAS, because I think it's safe to say they are very industry-wide, and to touch on Kevin, that the major benefit for me is that the efficiencies that it creates from for the availability of some of that data.
How willing are the supply chain to come on that journey with you? And the reason I asked that question, obviously, Compliance Chain is a certification body. We work with principal contractors to manage their supply chain, but also for the supply chain to get their certification through CAS or SSIP. And we see sometimes the reluctance from the supply chain to go and get that badge, to go and get the Common Assessment Standard. Do you guys see that day to day?
We were talking earlier on this, weren't we? We were saying there is some of them, they're quite mature in that position. They know what the requirements are, and then others need sort of upskilling in that area and sort of direction, don't they, to make them compliant and understand why the compliance is there. Us as contractors, we draw a lot of data from the Common Assessment Standard that allows us to make informed decisions down the line around tender lists and who we engage and who's suitable to go forward with, and that compliance associated with that.
Yeah. I think the supply chain, they need to understand that the Common Assessment Standard and all the assessment bodies, it's not a tick box exercise. It's there to demonstrate that they are compliant and they've got the skills needed as to work in the industry. It's the first stage due diligence to get onto a tender list into the industry.
And I think it's just to touch on that as well, the fact that it's at a business level, that ultimately the projects will need that information. And if the supply chain will ask those questions for every project, they probably need to recruit just to keep up with the demand of those pre-qualifications. So it's bringing it up to that sort of business level. The questions are answered and updated accordingly, and then they can sort of focus on the package of works that we're tendering or.
And at BAM then, and we'll come to Laing O'Rourke and Wates as well, do you just mandate a Common Assessment Standard? Because the other thing that we've seen sometimes is not Common Assessment Standard Plus, I don't want to call it that, but it's like a local flair. So it's kind of, here's the Common Assessment Standard, 188 questions, but BAM or Wates or CAS or whoever it may be, want to ask a couple more questions as well? Or do you guys just kill it dead at the 188 questions and that's it?
So within BAM, the Common Assessment Standard is a sort of mandatory requirement for all our subcontractors to sort of get a foot in the door, so to speak. So as a sort of procurement level, that's the sort of first pass, fail sort of expectation. Obviously, the projects will have relevant requirements on project level, but as a business, we don't ask too many more questions. That's certainly not that we track.
And is that the same for Wates and Laing O'Rourke?
Yeah, at Wates we ask for all subcontractors to be Common Assessment Standard accredited, all designers and material suppliers who have got design responsibility.
Okay.
Yeah, that's who we ask for. In terms of asking any further questions, we don't ask questions that would form part of an accreditation. We generally want information. So we might be asking for not the modern slavery and the bribery and corruption, but we'll be asking for payment information and things like that. So things that you can't assess, so it's not in the Common Assessment Standard.
Okay.
So very similar to the others. For subcontractors and suppliers, we ask the Common Assessment Standard questions, but we also incorporate safety scheme and procurement questions. And also the social value piece, we incorporate supply chain sustainability score as well, which we mandate that they need to be bronze level for subcontractors.
Good.
Yeah.
You mentioned, Kevin, around Build UK and going on that journey with Build UK, that collaboration piece. Does anyone want to add a little bit more detail on that in terms of what that's been like over the years? I know Build UK had a bash last night in London, didn't they? 10 years at Build UK, and how that's evolved and how then question sets have evolved.
I think probably start of this year we saw a massive piece from Build UK really pushing the BSA element of Common Assessment Standard, where they pulled all the contractors together and said we need an aligned position to get the supply chain compliant here and verified. So that was probably that's the biggest bit I've seen over the last 2 years, but probably in the last 6 months that's really pushed forward with.
Yeah. I mean, they've been integral in the success of the Common Assessment Standard, obviously, sort of as owners and bringing us all around the table. And I think just to touch again, repeat that sort of efficiencies for the supply chain perspective have been great, but there is still challenges. I think the Building Safety Act being a massive change that has been introduced this year, that is a challenge. It's not quite as clear cut as we would have. Well, we probably didn't think it was that clear cut, did we? But it is causing us, and no doubt, all the tier ones some headaches.
The thing with Build UK as well is that they've created the Common Assessment Standard, but they haven't just created it and walked away. It is continually being developed and evolved, and they hold the cross contractor meetings for the tier ones. We go in there, we input, we all say, well, that question's okay. That question we could do with this information. Yeah, the Common Assessment Standard is evolving. Yeah. And it does evolve, and Build UK chair them meetings.
Yeah. Just and on top of that, I mean, they have a government requirement to review yearly the question sets, and I think it's minimum 4 or 5. But they go beyond that. They don't just add in new question sets that we as contractors have put forward. They also review the existing ones, and do they need tweaking to be fit for purpose?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I know we've enjoyed that journey with Build UK in terms of kind of the development of them question sets, but we also see the challenges as well. And how do you see any challenge in your supply chain in terms of you've got really good subcontractor, but they're just struggling to get over the line with Common Assessment Standard?
I'd say it's a mix. I would say it's a mix. We work with quite a lot of SMEs, and sometimes they don't necessarily have the resource to be able to get the first verification. I would say that's certainly if they are sort of new to the market, they might need some support. But within BAM, and no doubt these guys as well, there is support within the business as well as the recognised assessment bodies like yourselves that would be able to support them through, and then updating those requirements as and when. This year, version 5 has been quite a lot of new questions that have come out with regard to the Building Safety Act and Procurement Act, and it's actually upskilling those that are answering the questions on the portal, because sometimes it's trying to direct the right questions to the right people within the organisations.
I suppose what's nice is that the more principal contractors that get on board with Build UK and get on board with the Common Assessment Standard, the easier it is for the supply chain, because they don't have to do it for everyone. They've just got to do it once, and then they can go and work for Wates, Laing O'Rourke and BAM with that Common Assessment Standard certification. So the higher the adoption, the better it's going to be for everyone.
But we'll caveat. I think it's not just a case they complete their profile and all right, we park it for a year. They've got to make sure they're maintaining that and updating it accordingly.
100%. It's a live document.
It is, definitely.
It ain't a case of you just complete it to win an order.
It
is a live document. All main contractors who have signed up to CAS can see them responses. They're not just completing it for just one contractor to win one order. All the main contractors can see that information and expect it to be up to date.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because there's 6 certification bodies who can give that common assessment badge. Obviously, compliance chain being one, but the pressure on the certification bodies is to make sure that we can react to them updates as well. Because ultimately, we wouldn't want a subcontractor that information becomes unverified, goes into the verification pool, sits there for 3 weeks while the assessment body or the certification body has to re-review that information, and then they can't bid on your tender because. So I think the more people that get on board, the more certification bodies like ourselves need to adapt to that to make sure we can verify information in time. Just moving on in terms of getting tender ready then. Obviously, you have different requirements for your supply chain. We've said one of the main ones is Common Assessment Standard, but what advice would you give to suppliers and subcontractors that they need to do to come and work on your projects?
I think the first thing is, as you've said, is they need to be Common Assessment Standard accredited. That's the minimum to get on a list to be considered. And I think then they just need to be honest with themselves as to what's their capability, what's their capacity, what geographical area they work in. I think there's a lot of contractors that can subcontractors that can go out there and just chase orders. But is it actually their bread and butter work, and are they skilled to do that work? And I think with the BSA coming in, that skill level and the being able to demonstrate it and evidence it as the next hurdle for them, to be fair.
And look, our clients, on every tender that we go for, they're adding in new targets, especially around carbon and social value piece. And it's just making sure our supply chain is educating them as well to upskill themselves, innovate, have the evidence that they can provide that sort of gets them on that tender list, really.
And bring them on that journey.
That's it, exactly.
I think the Common Assessment Standard and the work Build UK have done in having a standardised set of questions, and you touched on their carbon reporting and social value reporting, and BAM, we have our sort of methods, and I assume the competition will do as well, and capturing the metrics can be very challenging.
It's daunting for them, for the supply chain, I imagine. It's all new to them, some of them.
Just sticking with that then, in terms of any quick wins. So is there any quick wins that your supply chain could be looking at in terms of getting them tender opportunities? And I suppose one thing I want to come back to, and in fact we'll talk about it now, is financial stability. Obviously the biggest threat to any project is the supply chain and their finances. What sort of checks and balances do you put in place as organisations when you're signing them orders to ensure that the financial stability of your supply chain is robust?
And we have obviously a lot of checks and measures at the pre-con stage, and even sort of that selection for a tender list. To receive a tender, we'd like to do some thorough checks, whether that's credit checks, whether that's capability and understanding of in association with the package that we'll be tendering. So it's we have within the procurement team, there'll be they'll do some risk assessments based on sort of those, and then we bring in the finance teams and the credit checks. But ultimately, as well, the supply chain have to be comfortable that BAM is still going to be around for the next few years. So we're very open with where we can be with sharing sort of where our workload is, and particularly with our sort of key partners, our sort of supply chain that are sort of regular workers with us. And but yeah, obviously those due diligence checks are massive, and the common assessment standard means we can focus on what's sort of on the more important stuff, let's say, that without discounting the importance of the CAS.
Just on that then, in terms of that Dan just mentioned around BAM's scope of projects and what they've currently got on, how honest are the supply chain with you guys, you think, in terms of how stretched they are? Obviously, it's a super competitive market for principal contractors. It's even more competitive at supply chain level. And how do you check that your supply chain isn't overstretched when you're placing that order?
I think that comes down to relationships. Your relationship that, as a main contractor, you have with your supply chain. To be able to have that open and honest conversation as to, look, we've given you, say, 3 orders, but how many have BAM given? How many have Laing given? In terms of some of the trades we've got in the industry, we're all using the same subcontractors, and if we're not careful, yes, we will overstretch them. But yeah, it's that relationship you've got with your subcontractor. You need that open, honest conversation as to, obviously, commercial interests aside, that what work have you got on? When's it likely to finish? What's your capacity going forward for next year after? Things like that.
Yeah, I think we all do the similar checks and balances on that when we're placing orders. The financial checks, we put notifications in with one of the credit providers to flag up anything. But as we know, things can change overnight. Insolvencies are massive in construction industry, aren't they? So, it's something, like you said, we link in with our supply chain with the relationship meetings. When we're placing orders, we want to understand their turnover and order value against that turnover, so we're not overstretching them. But it's right, it's probably a bit more transparency is probably needed around their total workload with others, which isn't always the case. We do get good insights from the supply chain, but not probably the true picture. They're pushing for turnover all the time, aren't they? So it's a very difficult thing to manage, but we seem to get by. Yeah,
you may have already answered this question, and I think you probably have as you've been talking. But I'll ask it anyway. It's around what's the added extra? What's the above and beyond that can win a subcontractor or a tender package? So let's take a scenario where common assessment standard we've established, it's foot in the door. That gets you over the first hurdle. Commercial, obviously they've got to be the races, but you've got a couple of tenders that are all at the races. What is it? What makes you select that? What is that little bit of extra that makes you select that subcontractor over the others when the commerciality is quite tight? They've got the common assessment badge, and what makes you pick A over B?
I think you're right. We've probably touched on some of them. I think some of the added value we'll look for, whether that's within the social value space and on any sort of carbon benefits that they might be willing to sort of share or able to share through the tender process, and ultimately that relationship as well. That making there has to be a sort of a lot of trust in each other, and openness and transparency on the likes of workload on the management teams that are going to be responsible for delivering those packages, making sure it's that they're right for the package that's been awarded. So and sort of putting some metrics against that has been challenging. I think it's safe to say, and internally it's left for the project procurement teams and commercials to sort of make those decisions.
Okay.
So, Laing O'Rourke, probably it was about 2-3 years ago, we introduced a balanced scorecard. So all our subcontractors and suppliers where we're placing orders over 250k, we carried out a balanced scorecard with them during the recommendation piece. So it covers not just the traditional commercial assessment, but also bits on ESG, innovation, their digital delivery, their past performance as well. So all those get factored into a weighted scoring. And that's how we assess them. So it isn't just done on price; it's done with a right decision-making sort of approach. Yeah,
I think that's one message we should probably get into the supply chain. It's not all about price. No. It's about best value that picks in the quality, the health and safety. Yes, there is a price element to it. There's a social value piece to go in there as well, and all the carbon, for example. But as a main contractor, when we're contracted on a project, the social value piece is not a nice to have. We're contractually obliged to deliver that because that's now written into the contracts.
That's it, yeah.
I think we've got some public sector people on the call and clients, and it'd be interesting to have a little chat around how you're procured and how that can benefit you and your supply chain. And I'm going back to the age-old allergy of two-stage versus single-stage now, and the benefits of two different procurement routes. And is single-stage a no-no within your organisations? Don't do it, the closed door. Or is it the fact that you will do a little bit of single stage for the right opportunity? And when you do go two stage, what is the benefit of doing that to your supply chain?
So, is it a no? It's preferred two stage tender. I think two stage tender allows much more collaboration at a much earlier stage and influencing and design decisions that can benefit everything we talked about, that sort of digital delivery, quality, social, and that early engagement is key. And that's not just on a contractor perspective, it's working right through the supply chain with manufacturers, suppliers, not just subcontractors. A lot of the skills will lie throughout that supply chain, and a big part of what we've been working on is making sure that we've got those right links in through consultants and design teams back to clients. But no, that collaboration is key for a successful project.
We're the same, yeah. We want to work with clients in the pre-construction stage early. We're a bit different. We've got our own factories that produce off-site concrete products and M&E systems and everything. So clients want to come to us early. We can then implement design, get them cost certainty, design certainty and program certainty and drive it forward that way in that early engagement, but bring also the supply chain in early as well, which is what they all want. They want to be involved from the very beginning, don't they? So they can bring in all the smarts, de-risk it because design is not mature enough. So yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned risk there. It's not necessarily de-risk. It's understand where the risk is
exactly
and apportion it correctly as opposed to trying to just write a contract and pass it down the line. Yeah, it's transparency. I think would sum it up. You've got to be transparent with everybody.
We are going to move on shortly to our next set of questions, but just as a break before we do, please keep submitting your questions in the not the chat function, the question function. And what we can do is we can break and feed some of them questions to our panel. So as we talk, don't wait till the end to submit your questions, submit them as we go. I'm going to move on to social value. It has come up a couple of times. It is on the agenda for us to talk around today. And I think that at principal contractor level, we see some amazing things happening up and down the country from a social value perspective. How do you bring the supply chain on that journey with you to deliver them kind of real tangible measures at the end? Not the bean counting social value where one apprentice equals 40 grand or whatever. The real measures, the real tangible measures that have outcomes.
Like I said, we're contractually obliged to deliver it, but we've got to think when we're working in all these communities, we're not just building a building, we are delivering for that community, whether that's apprenticeships, work placements, enhancing and mentoring small SMEs and social enterprises. As a main contractor, we've got an awful lot to give, but we do need the supply chain to help us facilitate that.
Definitely. We're very similar. Yeah, we especially around SMEs, we try and support them, highlight what's needed to work on some of our projects, but it's difficult. Yeah, it's time, isn't it? We've got a quality function that try and step in there with our sustainability teams to educate the supply chain, and we do training days, workshops with them and everything. Yeah, and obviously the accreditation bodies are really good. They support on those sort of local supply chain events and all that. So that really helps us, where our projects are up and down the country, trying to get that engagement locally.
The thing is, as well, is as a main contractor or a large subcontractor, you can have a team of people that work on this. As when you get down to some of the smaller subcontractors, there is nobody there dedicated to working on the social value side of things. More and more subcontractors are realising the benefit of social value and are employing people specifically in that role.
Yeah. And I think as you've just touched on, a lot of us have teams that are able to support those SMEs and actively, if that SME doesn't need to go out and necessarily employ somebody new in the business just to carry out that role, there'll be support available with the tier one contractors that they're working for, as long as there's a willingness and a motivation to be involved, which what we have found as well is once these SMEs are getting involved, they're seeing some real benefits, not just to the communities and the areas that they're working, but also to their own business. So it's what they find then is they're knocking on the door asking for more help, and long may it continue.
Yeah. I think it's one of them, isn't it? Sometimes that they feel that your subcontractors feel like they can't make an impact because they're not on the project long enough to make an impact. So ultimately, if you think of how you're measured as a principal contractor, well, you're effectively measured around, you've got on a project for 18 months, you get a target that you set in, and you start delivering against that target, whether that be apprentices, whether that be working with needs, whether that be school placements, whatever that may be. But the subcontractors find that, well, I might only come to this contract for 16 weeks, and what can I actually do in that 16-week period to make an impact? And it kind of goes back to the to this kind of two-stage, single-stage stuff. If they are on board early, then they can plan for how they can support the overall plan in that early stage. So, you got any experience of that happening?
We do try again. That 2 stage is definitely certainly a benefit. We probably find it a little bit not necessarily easier, but more collaborative with those sort of large 7-8 trades who are generally sort of up to speed with the requirements and where some of those benefits are. And whilst sort of the bean counting, as you called it before, is it is a good measure. I'm an ex-QS confession here, but it is also good to be able to understand sort of what that proxy value is and where we can really look to feed into it and look. We talk about the numbers, whether it's the Procurement Act and making sure that sort of 10% of the tenders are evaluated that way, or whether it's actually managing and measuring the actual social value outcomes on a project as well. Yeah,
actually, we built a product in compliance chain that is specifically aimed at the subcontractor market, linked to social value. So what we were finding was, obviously, social value software is expensive, and it's okay for principal contractors because they're managing multiple projects. But a subcontractor to go, what is their impact over 16 weeks of a project? It's hard for them to equate that because they haven't got access to the software. So we built a product for £1,500 where effectively the subcontracting get access for the year, and then for the whole year they can effectively look at all the good stuff they do in these 16 weeks that they're on the projects and tabulate it into a bean counting method of what is that worth in pounds and pence. So I think that the market needs to open up a little bit and let these guys in. Yeah. Let's move on to Build UK and industry alignment. We're kind of looping back to where we started a little bit, but around influence and procurement strategies and what, in terms of the supply chain coming on that journey and looking at the projects that you've worked on in the past or been involved with. Can you have any examples of good projects where you've been involved early and that supply chain collaboration at the start has enabled real tangible outcomes for the clients, whether that be in social value, whether that be in cost savings, whether that be in value engineering?
I think we're both working on one at the moment.
We're working on the prisons.
The prison
that's
framework.
it. Yeah,
example.
Definitely. Yeah, and that's
just explain to everyone how that works, because I understand obviously how that works. It's multiple contractors working on single designs against multiple schemes, isn't it?
Under a lot of an alliance, isn't it? Yeah, where the procurement strategies are set out by all parties, and they come to an agreement on those, and then it's an aligned position going forward how we engage supply chain. Whether that's information targets and so forth. That's been outlined to them.
I think from main contractor to client relationship, I think it's certainly been beneficial for the client, and I think it's certainly been beneficial for all the main contractors on that framework.
Yeah.
Is there a protectiveness over your supply chain when you're working under that sort of collaborative arrangements? So effectively, you've got Wates sitting there, you've got Laing O'Rourke sitting there, you're developing designs together, but then when it comes actually delivering these schemes and it comes out the back end, is there a willingness to share your supply chain with your peers? Just answer that question.
I think it's been quite open and transparent on the prisons, isn't it? Talking to the team that are on there, they all manage certain packages, they outline the supply chain, and everyone comes to an agreement, don't they? And some of those are multiple.
The other thing is that you're not all needing the same subcontractor at the same time.
Yes.
That's for different programs as well. It is easy to manage. But even if it isn't the prison framework, I think we all use pretty much the same major subcontractors for the major packages. So,
Yeah.
I'd say, as somebody not necessarily involved in that alliance, I'd say it's a bonus because you actually understand where the supply chain are being used. Because we will ask, touching on your point you made earlier about trying to understand capacity and workload tracking of the supply chain. Actually, if it's part of this alliance and everyone's aware, well, we're going to this package will end then, and it ties in nicely with the other projects. I think it's a good thing personally.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Let's talk about the skills gap and supply chain. Obviously, that's that is an impending cliff, isn't it? I think I seen a stat the other day that 40% of the current trade workforce will be retired by 2035. So we're 10 years away from 40% of the current trade workforce not being around anymore. And that's going to lead to high demand, hyperinflation. And some of these national critical infrastructure projects that are 10-year programs could suffer as a result of this. What pressures are you seeing now in the supply chain? You seeing any of the early cracks starting to form in terms of skills gap and demand for certain packages?
I suppose it's we're not necessarily seeing them front and centre, but we do as within sort of the supply chain management side, we can start. You can see it at a distance with regards to motivation and enthusiasm for certain packages, whereby if the industry's in a bit of a low, we'd normally have phone ringing non-stop, whereas actually when we are peaking, it's all of a sudden we're ringing them and there's not the interest to price work, and then coming onto site, it's not necessarily that skills gap, it's the quality guys and getting that quality into the industry, because those guys that are retiring have got 40 years experience under them, and it's really important to get the youth of today interested in construction and see some of the benefits that it is, because it's a great industry.
We're seeing certain trades where typically they're huge workforce, when on site, volumes of, say, dry liners, they're starting to think outside the box now and looking for that off-site piece with, partition systems and all that, just to deal with one, quality, but also it's around, less workforce and time on site, and labour to install the works. So we're starting to see those from certain trades, fit-out contractors doing that off-site piece as well.
I think this, going back to touching on the social value again, this goes back to bringing in new people, trying to make the construction industry appealing to them. You might be working outside of the rain of the cold weather, but there's plenty of other roles in the construction industry that we're desperate for people to work into them and bring the skills into there. So it's getting into them schools and getting the understanding that there is plenty of roles in construction that you can come and do.
What are them packages then? I'll stick with you guys, but what are them packages Dan just mentioned in terms of the ones that you're starting to see them supply demand cracks for already? Is it M&E? Is it curtain wall? And is there any in particular that you can highlight and say, what, they are stretched at the minute? Put you on the spot there, haven't I?
It's difficult, yeah. I mean, we're obviously different because we do the structures and the M&E off-site and bring that to site. But there has been, like I said, some of the dry liners, they're struggling. Their workforce is typically through agencies, and those, you can't blame them. They're going down the road for an extra £5 an hour or whatever it is. So their workforce is changing all the time, and they're having to rethink, how do we get smarter around engaging their workforce on the projects, especially when it's, workforces, we've got retirements and we've got, people not wanting to work on sites because it is dark and cold and all that. So hence, I think the supply chain generally is starting to rethink how they operate. Yeah.
Okay. Have you, anyone can jump in on this, but obviously we've gone through a period of quite hyperinflation, really. There could be another one on the horizon. But have you, looking back at the last 5 years, how have you as individual organisations tried to manage that or to try and de-risk that inflation within the supply chain the best you can?
It's if I'd answer to that, I'd be somewhere in the net. But no, it's a great question, and it goes back really to those full sort of horizontal supply chain really, and working with our clients where we can, working with the manufacturers of products and trying to weave them in with the subcontractors, and I think it is really difficult because we work a lot in pre-construction, and if we're talking about dry lining, it could be 2 years ahead, and as close as we are to the manufacturers, they're not necessarily going to fix those rates, and with inflation that we've experienced, particularly the last 5 years, it's probably hurt us all. I think it's safe to say with some of the issues we've all encountered, and it is difficult. It's a moving target, and I suppose it's just that relationship piece and that collaboration are sort of key to try and mitigate some of those risks.
Yeah, we're very much the same. Yeah, it's been a struggle to deal with those situations, but the supply chain have been quite transparent around costs and all that. Definitely during pre-con stage, and it is hard to lock in the rates with them and increases, but we try and bring in the manufacturers as well to support on that and highlight what typical increases occur. We know certain packages, like dry lining, for instance, they have their standard sort of increases typically in January coming up. So we're good. We've got one coming up in January. So, but no, we try and work with the manufacturers and the supply chain subcontractors to sort of map that out. Really.
Yeah.
I think one challenge that's probably faced us all over, particularly the last few years, is that delayed start dates on site as well for various reasons. Just getting into main contracts because actually a slippage at that stage, all of a sudden you can be pushing back out your fixed rates that you think you've agreed that will be working in line with a programme. All of a sudden it's we've moved on a slot, whether that's a month, 2 months. And what we find as well, the subcontract supply chain, they might look at 4 jobs at any one time, and all of a sudden if your package has moved back, they've got a bit of a gap. That gap actually might be much smaller than their work packages. So all of a sudden your preferred subcontractors have found alternative work, and you're back out to the markets, so that uncertainty does impact us more than just the delayed start, so to speak, and the delayed end. It impacts the sort of the whole sort of programme of works that we've got planned.
Yeah. Do you think clients are getting smarter in terms of that kind of not asking you to fix prices for ridiculous amount of times? Obviously, going through what we've just gone through, and there's probably more projects, hasn't in the last 2 years that have been delayed than the last 10 before it. All these projects that are stuck in the second stage, stuck in the mud, stuck in PCSAs. Obviously, you guys don't make any money off PCSAs, and you need to get that demand to get into site. But do you think clients are getting more wise now when you go back knocking on the door and say, listen, we agreed to this contract 4 months ago, that the supply chain now needs to reprice it? Or do you think clients are still, computer says no, that was the price that you give us 4 months ago, that's what you've got to live by?
I think it's always not good going to clients when there's increases, but at the same time, if you can evidence it and the supply chain provide that information, they do accept it. We don't see that pushback, especially if projects are going to the right, and as we know, increases come. So as long as you can evidence it, we work with the supply chain to collate that information together. We feel like clients do take on board what we're telling them.
It's having a good relationship with the client from the outset, and being transparent about what you're trying to achieve together.
Yeah. Because
if the subcontractor's struggling, the main contractor struggles, the client doesn't necessarily get the quality product that they wanted at the end.
And clients are quite hands-on. During that PCSA period, they're reviewing the packages with you, whether it's sealed bids or, sitting in the room with the subcontractors when the bids do come back to assess them. So they've got a lot smarter and collaborative around it, really.
Do you think with obviously the supply chain being the biggest risk from a principal contracting perspective to a project success, can you see more principal contractors moving back to the older models where they start to bring key subcontract trades in-house?
Obviously, these
we do a lot in-house anyway, because we like that control and the workforce and obviously the off-site element. So we've always been in that space, really. But
we've got an off-site manufacturing facility as well for M&E, things like that.
Can you see that getting ramped up?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, definitely. Because it increases your quality, but it also reduces your waste. So if you have got inflationary pressures, you're actually offsetting some of them by reducing waste.
But I suppose touching on that point again, it's that client relationship, because there might be a slight increase in that sort of initial cost, but it's putting a value on some of the other benefits, and it's that cost value sort of space. But again, within BAM, we're working quite closely at the minute with our sort of infrastructure team, understanding, because that's a lot more driven by sort of labour-only subcontractors. But the market isn't necessarily there. If we all sort of wanted to change to that approach, there would need to be some
touch on those insolvencies. We saw one this week, an off-site manufacturing company go to administration, so it's high risk again, like facade companies and all that. Yeah.
Just kind of looking forward then. These are my last set of questions, by the way. So if you have got any questions to ask, put them in the Q&A facility now, because in 3 minutes' time we'll be coming over to you guys. So looking ahead, what risks around the corner do you see in terms of supply chain? We may have mentioned some of these already in terms of some of the stringent targets put on them against carbon, some of the stuff around social value targets, inflation. But I suppose I'll come to all of you in turn. We'll start yourself and come around this way. But as a supply chain lead from Wates, what keeps you up at night?
Supply chain compliance with Building Safety Act.
Okay.
Stole my line there.
Mine as well.
Yeah, that is the big thing in the industry at the moment, is the Building Safety Act, and getting the supply chain to understand, firstly, it applies to them. Too many subcontractors think it doesn't apply to them, and it does. Yeah. It's every. I can't think of a trade that it wouldn't apply to on our projects. I just can't.
Yeah.
It's so.
And I think the version 5 of the CAS is out there now. The supply chain will be measured on it. I think as of 1st of November, the questions are now absolutely mandatory. And one of the difficulties is actually when asked the question, is the Building Safety Act relevant to yourselves as a supply chain partner? Whilst I appreciate answering no does actually get you to the next stage. We are, as a main contractor, checking those responses now, and it is identified in your homepage and making sure. So whilst you might be gold verified, it is bringing into the forefront that you've actually answered no, and they will be checked during our tender process. So it is an important part.
We're doing the same. It is that first question. It's a little bit too easy to get around at the moment. And it needs making. I understand why it can't be a pass-fail. I understand that, speaking to Build UK. But yes, too many subcontractors think the Building Safety Act doesn't apply to them. That's the big push on the industry. And we're only talking organisational competency at the moment. We haven't gone down to individual
workforce compliance. I was going to say it's probably on the horizon, isn't it?
Okay.
And also see, obviously, modern slavery's it's been there. It's in the question sets, but I can see more emphasis going on that going forward as well. And on the carbon stuff, we're starting to get really involved in the CBAM. I don't know if anyone's else been involved in that. So, especially around some of our trades, facades, aluminium, glass, steel. So that's going to be ramping up in 2026, going into 27. Yeah.
I have got one more question just come to mind, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Around cyber security in the supply chain. Obviously, we've got some new legislation on the horizon where effectively that the supply chain are at risk in terms of, if Wates were to get a breach or Laing O'Rourke or a breach, at the minute you'd pay the fine. But what's coming in obviously around the horizon in the new year is that fine can be passed down to the supply chain if the breach was caused by them. What requirements do you put on your supply chain around cyber security?
Cyber Essentials Plus, we do, yeah.
Everyone's got to have it.
And also, or I think it's ISO 27001 certification, but some of them have both. So, yeah, we want to see that compliance as a minimum, yeah.
Good. Well, thanks. That was really good. I think we got a lot from that 45 minutes, but we'll hand back to Justin for some Q&A.
Brilliant. Thanks, chaps. That was really interesting stuff. And there are a lot of questions, and one of which you've effectively just answered. But as you were just on that, I think just letting your studio know. Oh no, you're back on full screen. There we go. So just because you brought up the cybersecurity one. So one of the questions is CAS evolving to take account of the increasing risks around cybersecurity, and having reported on a few breaches, it is often that the breach initiates at in the supply chain and then goes up into the major contractor from there. So did you want to say anything more about the cybersecurity?
Probably step in there. Some of the sectors we're working in, MOD and prisons, it's obviously we do capture that within the question sets, and the certification around that, but we're having to do additional questions, on some of the projects we work on, DEFRA and all that. So there is enhanced questions that sit outside of CAS, but I think us and probably Wates and a few others are starting to upskill in that area and have that second stage of questions that we ask the supply chain that then goes through a verification sort of quality team to assess.
Yeah. Okay. Any of the rest of you want to throw in on that one, or shall I move on? I'll move on. Okay. So someone asks, how are the panel recording and measuring social value? Or how do you expect to be social value metrics to be presented to you by your supply chain?
Yeah, it's a good question. We did touch on it slightly earlier with sort of that sort of bean counting and the measures within BAM. We use the TOM, social value TOMs, themed outcomes measures, and there's proxy values associated with the variety of social value benefits that you're able to offer. And what I would say is reach out to your contractors, or the support is available within the tier ones in particular. And it's not easy to sit here today and say exactly what you can do, because I don't know who's necessarily asking the questions, because it's there's a vast of benefits. Some of our clients will prioritise certain things. We do a lot in education, and T-level apprenticeships are a big driver for that. Within our tenders, obviously, by the time we've appointed a subcontractor, that sort of local spend is committed to the selected subcontractor. So actually, it's picked up during that tender process as well, and making sure where it is local supply chain, we are engaging with the right tenderers at early enough stage to be able to get that benefit.
I think one of the problems is that there's different portals out there that measure social value in different ways. Obviously, us being one of them, compounding the problem. But it's around looking at kind of them measures and making sure that you're not overclaiming as well. There's two sides to social value, isn't there? There's the added social value that we measure on our project, but there's also an stringent social value that's just related by the fact that you're building a new hospital in that location. Now, the stringent social value should be the same for every project. It's the added social value that you put on top of that. So I think as long as you're using a set of measures that's accredited by organisations like Social Value International, Social Value UK, then I'm not really too worried about kind of different contractors using different platforms, providing the platform that they're using, the measures haven't been made up by some guy sitting in his back bedroom that pushes them out and says, here's the measures. There's got to be some rigour to them measures.
Yeah, excellent. Good answer. I'm going to take in some of the questions from those where they've identified themselves. So Paul Land, and this goes back to something you talked about earlier. As a leader of an SME and being over 60, these ideas seem to be created to drive us older, experienced trades from real business when really we have more than a lot to add. What are your thoughts, and how are you wondering why? Are you wondering why trades and experience are disappearing from the sector? And is that what you're seeing?
I suppose it's like we said earlier, it's quite daunting, all the question sets and the requirements and targets and calculations have to be put together, isn't it? One thing we started back in May at Laing O'Rourke, we were, especially around the BSA, we were bringing in the supply chain into our head office to roll out sort of training and awareness that we use the accreditation bodies to support on. And then we followed it up with a recent webinar as well with them, just queries that have come out of that. It's about just educating everyone, bouncing ideas off the SMEs and supply chain, and as well as contractors. It's not just contractors pushing it down to our supply chain, it's also our supply chain and educating us as well and highlighting what's needed and support. Yeah.
And to add to that, I think there is an awful lot of industry knowledge out there, whether it be the main contractors, the assessment bodies, trade bodies, suppliers. There's a lot of industry knowledge out there, and it's just tapping into it. Just ask questions, and ultimately ask the main contractor who you're engaging with.
Yeah. Okay. Good advice. All right. Okay. I'll pull out the next question. This from a named individual, David Sexton. As a consultancy working on behalf of SMEs, we are increasingly being asked to assist with tender bids and questionnaires. Some of the questions being asked of small companies with limited turnover are really directed at tier 1 companies. Do the panel think that enough thought goes into the questions asked in relation to the size of tender values? For example, we were recently requested to provide a business contingency plan for a SME who was pricing a decoration package worth 10K.
I do hope that wasn't from BAM. It's not. We wouldn't necessarily be asking those sorts of questions to those packages. I think touching on generally, and whilst that doesn't necessarily answer that Paul's question, it is about sort of the most advantageous tender these days. It's not just that commercial, so we are asking sort of over and above what's your best price for the works. It's because it's about the full package we're buying for our client and ultimately for ourselves, and obviously then it sets it in good stead. But no, I would say that particular example doesn't necessarily feel.
If that's common, then we need to be feeding that back to Build UK, don't we? Which we all sit on Build UK panel, reviewing CAS questions. So we need to be feeding that back. Yeah,
that sounds like an example that we see quite a lot. And to defend you guys, it comes from the client. Yes. So the client turns around and says, everyone that works on my project should have right. and then you guys go out to your supply chain and you obviously issue them sort of, and maybe it's a little bit of a education piece back to the main client to say, is this really relevant? I know this is a whitewash what you want to apply across your supply chain, but is this really relevant for some of them trades?
Yeah, great answer. Danielle asks, how do you anticipate the new social value model contractor commitments being embedded into contracts? And do you foresee any financial penalties for non-compliance?
So to pick up on the first point, I think they are. I think our contracts we're obliged under the contracts to deliver values at certain values of social value, and I'm thankful to say that within BAM we've got a great team and we often regularly exceed sort of those expectations. And actually, the tougher targets that we're trying to achieve now are internally set, and it's always good to push ourselves as a business and with the support of the supply chain and really sort of develop things that way. With regards to financial penalties being incurred as a result of non-compliance, it is a difficult question, in certain walks of life, that actually if there is a financial penalty, there'll be that perception that actually people will act in a better way. But there's two sides to this for me. Part of me thinks, because we should all just achieve that, and the financial penalty shouldn't be put upon ourselves and passed down. But sometimes certain things in walks of life, it does work, that motivation. But for me, I personally would say the real benefit is engaging with social value, and it shouldn't be done as a forced sort of action.
I mean, this has been coming, and this has been coming for a long time, and that is why, if you look at the three organisations represented across the table here, they have got layers of social value people within their business. It's not just kind of one guy or girl that sits in one office. There's layers right up to board level of social value people, and when commercial organisations make them sort of financial commitments to grow these teams, well, it's done for a reason. It's done, number one, because it's the right thing to do, but number two, because these contractual obligations are coming around the corner and they need someone in their organisation to make sure that they meet them contractual obligations. So I think it's been coming for a while. I think frameworks are a good home to make sure these targets are met, because then it's not, with a framework, it's not necessarily a financial penalty. It's the penalty of not being able to bid other work. So it's not kind of penalising that project and that client. It's penalising the contractor across multiple projects. But I think it's been coming, and I think it's right, really. I think it's the right thing to do, to be contractually obliged, because we get a lot of bid bling, don't we, in our organisation? People putting in tenders the fantastic stuff that they're going to do that doesn't happen. So, but I think I don't think it's unexpected. Yeah.
Kevin, Richard, any thoughts on that one?
Same, aligned to the others. Yeah, definitely on that. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Giuseppe asks, should the likes of social value and health and safety be priced separately to ensure financial provision for these practices?
I think that'd be very awkward to. I think that'd be very, very awkward to do. Should it be done? I think it'd be nice to see some money ring fenced for social value. How it can be done, though, that's going to take a bit of thinking about. And if you're just looking at one tender price coming in,
I suppose within the prelims, isn't it? They've set out their subcontractors or supply chain have highlighted their sort of allowances and their resource to carry that out. And but like you said, it should be ring fenced and
Yeah. Okay. Opiyemi asks, what are the best qualities and expertise standards you are looking for in a reliable supply chain?
You need the best of everything, don't you? We're very appreciative, I think, in procurement that there's a lot of sort of areas to look at, whether it's social value, obviously we've talked a lot about today, but sustainability, digital. There's so many areas, and it's kind of the health and safety and the quality and the cost management has become sort of the norm, and we can't necessarily take our eye off that either, because that's been the bread and butter for longer. It's obviously something that's so. In answer to the question, all of it. I think would be my thought.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and any further detail from the rest of you?
I mean, I know working with you guys that it's always going to the benchmark is always going to be quality and health and safety. You know, and quality, health and safety, time management, cost management. You know, they are going to be the four that drives any principal contracting organisation every time.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, this one's just come in. Can tenders be won and lost by miscalculating the intangibles, or would this be covered by consultation / education by the tier one contractor?
I would like to think it'll probably depend on the sort of tender. I'd like to think that the collaboration would happen on a sizable award. We do generally offer sort of the pre-award interviews with those bidders that have put in a good submission, and we would also open some clarification sessions in order to establish really if it is a bit of a misunderstanding, or actually if there is just an error in the calculations. We do like to everyone we would send out tenders to, they are thoroughly ran through, and ultimately it's making sure that we're comparing apples with apples throughout the process.
Yeah, but you're right, interviewing and bringing them in and addressing those issues, it's critical. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that.
Do you guys ever take a two-stage approach to your supply chain tenders? So obviously, we talk about single stage, two-stage, but I think that's important as well, isn't it? That you can't beg clients for two-stage, and then when it comes to how you procure your supply chain, just single stage bash them, can you? So it's kind of making sure with some of them key trades. Do you do that?
We do on facades in particular. Touching on earlier insolvencies, it's high risk with them. We've seen a lot of insolvencies in that particular trade over the last 5 years. But it's also working with them because they push design along from the early stages, where the client's design team might not have that expertise to push certain requirements and the latest, as we know, fire regs and stuff like that, and planning requirements. So,
Okay, all right. Possibly a slightly argumentative question. Should there be an element of quid pro quo? I've complied with CAS and your extra bespoke requirements, probably those from the client or whatever. Will I get paid faster?
I suppose I'll jump on that. I think obviously the Procurement Act now, particularly has mandated public sector 30-day payment terms that is well and truly embedded within sort of the business. It's I suppose paid faster. It's the interpretation of faster. I'd say when obviously that process doesn't happen overnight. We're a big organisation, and there is certain systems that that need to be sort of approved and payments approvals, and it's I suppose it's a good question.
And we're being held accountable for that under the new Fair Payment Code as well. So clients, particular public sector, will be auditing us and how we've got to report those figures on a quarterly basis. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just going back to the question, paid faster. Do they just want enhanced payment terms, or
or paid within 30 days?
Perhaps they'll come back to us afterwards. The final few questions are just coming in, so let's try and just squeeze those in if we can. So someone asks, when contractors go above, or could be clients, go above and beyond the social value on a project, will this help to build a relationship long term for future bids?
Repeat work.
Absolutely.
I mean,
yes,
definitely. Yeah, that's it.
Great. I'm just reading this question before I read it out loud. Rolf asks, with such an emphasis on university education and the dwindling skilled tradespeople, what are you doing within your own company assisting your subcontractors to encourage sustainable apprentice programs?
I mean, what are we doing within our own business from an apprenticeship internally?
Yes.
I suppose, we have. I did get told the number the other day, how many apprentices in the business, and there was a lot more than I thought, to be honest, within BAM UK and Ireland. And again, it's so much so we have actually set up our own apprentice schools now. But and we do share sort of our experiences with our sort of training teams, with particularly some of our key partners, and we're well aware some of them are doing similar, and certainly working with local education providers to support themselves through those apprenticeships that are available.
It's interesting, isn't it? 'Cause one of the things we spotted when we were building our social value matrices was around the being able to claim less for a year 2 and year 3 apprentice. So there's this big push to get year 1 apprentices into the system, because you get loads of points for them when you apply your measures. But then actually you get more by kind of getting just some more year 1s in year 1. So where is the motivation for sustainable apprentices if you're getting penalised for when they go into year 2 and year 3? It just doesn't make sense at all, and it needs addressing.
Yeah. Okay. I'm conscious of time. So we will end there. Apologies to those whose questions we haven't been able to get to. I am going to share my screen for the final time. Let's make sure this works. Yep, there we go. So it is time to wrap up this webinar. This webinar has been recorded, and you can watch it again or share the video with peers and colleagues via the original registration page from probably tomorrow morning. For more on Compliance Chain, go to compliancechain.com and keep up to date with everything construction at constructionmanagement.co.uk. Simply remains for me to say thank you to Compliance Chain for supporting this webinar, and thank you very much to Robbie, Dan, Kevin and Richard for their time and their significant input this afternoon. And thank you, the audience, for tuning in. Good afternoon.